Rama, 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 Hari Rama, Hari Rama, Hari. Okay, devotees, Hare Krishna. Welcome to our 39th evening of Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam. It's so nice to be here with you all again. And we are in the 10th chapter. We are in the 10th chapter. And last night, where did we get? We did the first section. So we did the very first section. Let's have a look here. Up till verse 6. So we'll carry on from verse 7, the second section. Okay, let us first of all chant our prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachadishtarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so here we go. Section B of chapter 10. Krishna prepares to leave Hastinapur. And here's the translation. Well, actually, no. First of all, we have to read the translations of the whole section. That's our practice, and it's a good practice, so we can get a sense of what's going on and what we're going to be discussing. So verse 7, Sri Hari, Lord Sri Krishna, resided at Hastinapur for a few months to pacify his relatives and please his own sister, Subhadra. So, I don't know if you remember, but at the end, well, anyway, not at the end of the last section, but there was mention of how Maharaj Yudhisthira asked Lord Krishna to stay a bit longer, so he stayed a few months longer. Verse 8. Afterwards, when the Lord asked permission to depart, and the king gave it, the Lord offered his respects to Maharaj Yudhisthira by bowing down at his feet, and the king embraced him. After this, the Lord, being embraced by others and receiving their obeisances, got into his chariot. Verses 9 to 10. At that time, Subhadra, Draupadi, Kunti, Uttara, Gandhari, Dhritarashtra, Yuyotsu, Kripacharya, Nakula, Sahadev, Bhimasena, Daumya, and Satyavati all nearly fainted because it was impossible for them to bear separation from Lord Krishna. Then verses 11 and 12. The intelligent who have understood the Supreme Lord in association with pure devotees and have become freed from bad materialistic association can never avoid hearing the glories of the Lord, even though they've heard them only once. How then could the Pandavas tolerate his separation? For they had been intimately associated with his person, seeing him face to face, touching him, conversing with him, and sleeping, sitting, and dining with him. What an amazing situation of separation. Verse 13. All their hearts were melting for him on the pot of attraction. They looked at him without blinking their eyes, and they moved hither and thither in perplexity. Verse 14. The female relatives, whose eyes were flooded with tears out of anxiety for Krishna, came out of the palace. They could stop their tears only with great difficulty. They feared that tears would cause misfortune at the time of departure. Verse 15. While the Lord was departing the palace of Hastinapur, different types of drums, like the mridanga, dola, nagra, dunduri, and dundubi, and flutes like the gomukha, and other instruments like venas and beris, all sounded together to show him honor. 16. Out of a loving desire to see the Lord, the royal ladies of the Kurus got up on top of the palace, and smiling with affection and shyness, they showered flowers upon the Lord. And verse 17. At that time Arjuna, the great warrior and conqueror of sleep, who is the intimate friend of the most beloved Supreme Lord, took up an umbrella which had a handle of jewels and was embroidered with lace and pearls. Verse 18. Uddhava and Satyaki began to fan the Lord with decorated fans, and the Lord, as the master of Madhu, seated on scattered flowers, commanded them along the road. Verse 19. Here and there were heard the benedictions being paid to Krishna, which were neither befitting nor unbefitting, because they were all for the Absolute, who was now playing the part of a human being. So that's what we're going to try to get through this evening, if we can. I think there's a good chance anyway. We'll just see how it goes. So as you can see, it's a really just such a wonderful description of Lord Krishna leaving Hastinapur for Dwaraka, and the extreme love and affection of all the Hastinapur Vasis towards him. So, yes, verse 7, Sri Hari, Lord Sri Krishna, resided at Hastinapur for a few months to pacify his relatives and please his own sister, Subhadra. So there's a couple of points from the purport. Well, we mentioned actually just some minutes ago that Krishna was about to start for Dwaraka after the funeral and after Queen Kunti offered her prayers. He was on his chariot already and was just about to leave when Maharaj Yudhisthira approached him, and so after the battle and after Yudhisthira was enthroned, and to oblige the request of Maharaj Yudhisthira and to show special mercy to Bhishma Dev, Lord Krishna stopped at Hastinapur, but then he stayed, especially to pacify Maharaj Yudhisthira, as well as to please his sister Subhadra. And she was very aggrieved because her only son Abhimanyu, who was just married, had been killed in the battle, leaving his wife Uttara, just a young girl, teenage girl, pregnant. So like this, the Lord stayed on for a few months. You might think it was a few hours or a day, but he stayed on for a few months. Verse 8. Afterwards, when the Lord asked permission to depart, and the king gave it, the Lord offered his respects to Maharaj Yudhisthira by bowing down at his feet, and the king embraced him. After this, the Lord, being embraced by others and receiving their obeisances, got into his chariot. So there's another shortish type of purport here. There are a couple of points. So, due to, the social norms, Yudhisthira was older than Krishna. Due to the spiritual norms, of course it was not like that at all. But due to in terms of the social norms of varnashram and seniority by age, from birth and all that, Yudhisthira was the elder cousin of Lord Krishna. And therefore, in deference to the social norms, Lord Krishna bowed down at Yudhisthira's feet. And Yudhisthira, of course, understanding the situation, just accepted the mood of the Lord. He didn't want to contradict the mood of the Lord by stopping him and then bowing down and, making a bit of a thing between them. So he accepted those obeisances and then embraced the Lord, which would, under those circumstances, be an expression of appreciation in seniority to someone who's bowed down to you. Yes, so Prabhupada makes the point that the Lord takes pleasure when some of his devotees accept him as less important on the basis of love. Not everyone, and not if there's no basis of love. If there's a basis of arrogance. I remember it was quite an experience I still remember to this day. I was distributing books or magazines on Oxford Street, London. Must have been 73, latest 74, but quite likely 73. And one hippie type, long hair and sort of disheveled looking fellow approached me. And I offered him a piece of literature. He wouldn't accept it. But he looked at me and said, "I have seen God." Yeah. Okay, good for you. Then another time, a very similar type of fellow walked up and said, "Show me God." So, that sort of attitude, the Lord will not take pleasure in them treating him like, he must just do this or that as we like. It's not like that at all. So, the example, of course, the famous example which we've just been reading about was Arjuna, who accepted the Lord as chariot driver, which is the position of a servant, not of, like someone senior. The person being driven on the chariot is the senior person. But the Lord was happy to do that. So Prabhupada says, no one is greater than or equal to the Lord, but he takes pleasure in being treated as younger than his devotees. These are all transcendental pastimes of the Lord. And Prabhupada makes the point, the impersonalists, they've got no access to such things at all. It's just, they're in another world altogether, and it's not a good one. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, thereafter Bhima and Arjuna embraced the Lord because they were of the same age, but Nakula and Sahadev bowed down before the Lord because they were younger. Yeah, so it's all going on the basis of social relationships. And there's a nice little story, you could say, just brief Leela. I think it's mentioned in Nectar of Devotion that Lord Krishna and Maharaj Yudhisthira met on the road one time on their chariots coming towards each other. And they were just very close when they decided to get off and offer obeisances to each other. So Lord Krishna got off really quickly and ran around to the side of Maharaj Yudhisthira's chariot, because they only have one sort of doorway, these chariots. And Lord Krishna got around there really quickly and offered full dandavats right under the doorway of Yudhisthira's chariot. And Yudhisthira had to stand there and accept the dandavats, although he wanted to get out and offer dandavats. But he couldn't step over the body of the Lord, so he just had to stand there. Hare Krishna. Okay, verses 9 and 10. At that time, Subhadra, Draupadi, Kunti, Uttara, Gandhari, Dhritarashtra, Yuyutsu, Kripa Acharya, Nakula, Sahadev, Bhimasen, Domya and Satyavati all nearly fainted, but because it was impossible for them to bear separation from Lord Krishna. Yeah. So Prabhupada makes wonderful point, and it's really such an important point. Krishna is so attractive, especially for the devotees, that it's impossible for the devotees particularly, to tolerate separation. Of course, Prabhupada then, as he has done so many times, describes the position of the conditioned souls briefly. The conditioned soul under the spell of illusory energy forgets the Lord. Otherwise, if he's not under the spell of illusory energy, he cannot forget the Lord. So, it's such an amazing scene. I mean, it's seen, but not seen exactly. It's such an amazing phenomenon, the separation between the Lord and his devotees. Prabhupada says the feeling of such separation cannot be described, but it can simply be imagined by devotees only. And I extracted a point from Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Leela. Antya. You know what? I forgot to put the verse number. I forgot anyway. So it's from the chapter, Sanatan Gosvami visits the Lord in Puri. There's just one chapter on that subject, so you can find it. And so Sanatan Goswami visited Lord Chaitanya in Puri, and then after a while Lord Chaitanya told him, go to Vrindavan. So Sanatan went. But when he left, there was one of these scenes of separation. And so the Chaitanya Charitamrita says, the scene of separation that took place when Sanatan Goswami and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took leave of each other is so piteous that it cannot be described herein. These transcendental emotions, that's something quite different from anything we've experienced or heard of or can imagine. So then Srila Prabhupada in the purport, back here in the Bhagavatam, talks about what happened in Vrindavan when Krishna left Vrindavan. That everybody, the innocent rural cowherd boys, girls, ladies, and others, all felt shock throughout their lives. And the separation of Radharani, the most beloved cowherd girl, is beyond expression. Yes. So then they met at Kurukshetra, and it was just those same feelings came out. They had been separated for many years. And Prabhupada says, the feeling which was expressed by them is heart-rending. And Prabhupada is generally very conservative, you could say, in how he presents himself. How he speaks and expresses himself. But, when he starts using terminology like this, heart-rending, that's, it means it really was heart-rending. Really. So then Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by explaining that there are different levels of devotees, basically. There are differences in qualities of the devotees, means in the kingdom of God, or the very advanced devotees. But none of them who have ever contacted the Lord by direct communion or otherwise can leave him for a moment. That is the attitude of the pure devotee. Then verses 11 and 12. The intelligent who have understood the Supreme Lord in association with pure devotees and have become freed from bad materialistic association can never avoid hearing the glories of the Lord, even though they've heard them only once. How then could the Pandavas tolerate his separation? For they'd been intimately associated with his person, seeing him face to face, touching him, conversing with him, and sleeping, sitting, and dining with him. Right, so here there's a purport, and it's amazing. So Prabhupada begins the purport by making a really important point, that our constitutional position is one of serving a superior. That's our constitutional position, ultimately serving the Lord, but by nature, in terms of the deepest aspect of our natures, we're all servants of Krishna. But if Krishna's not there, like here in this material world, people are just serving, even though they're not serving Krishna. So therefore you can say that the fundamental nature of the living entity is to serve. Ideally Krishna, but if he's not available, or if we've forgotten him and if we're in Maya, then even if we try to lord it over, but we end up being servants in all sorts of ways. Right. So Prabhupada makes this point that on the material level, he has to serve by force the dictates of the illusory material energy in sense gratification. And in that service to the senses, the person is never tired. I mean, he may get fried when he's unsuccessful, but it doesn't stop him having another go. If at first you don't succeed, try again. We have to give them 10 out of 10, maybe 11 out of 10 for trying. Yes. So even though sometimes he gets tired, I'm frustrated, I'm serving my senses, I'm not happy, oh gosh, what to do? But the material energy keeps forcing him, and he must carry on doing it. Yes. And so there's no end to all of that. There's no end. And the conditioned soul is entangled in those types of servitude. In this life, one type maybe. In the next life, another type. So on and on, Prabhupada says, without hope of release. But there is hope for release by the association with pure devotees. Then gradually one comes to the transcendental position, real position, knowing Krishna. And serving Krishna and not the senses. So, material, society, friendship, and love are all different phases of lust. They think it's love often, but it's not, it's lust. But as one, and all these things are causes of bondage, but as one associates with pure devotees and hears from them nicely, then that attachment for material enjoyment slackens, and the attraction for hearing about the Lord becomes more and more prominent. Yes, and Prabhupada says, once that attraction begins, it just goes on hearing without stopping, like fire in gunpowder. Okay. And Prabhupada notes, as we read earlier in the Atmarama verse, that even people who are impersonally realized, or maybe they've realized the supersoul, that's also possible, but that Krishna is so attractive, they become attracted to him also. Yeah, even though they may already be liberated in a certain sense from the clutches of material nature. So therefore, Prabhupada says, it's easily understood how the Pandavas must have felt. Well, I don't know if it's, for me, so easily understood, but we get a glimpse. We get a glimpse of how it all is. They couldn't even think of separation because their attraction to the Lord was just so extremely intense. Yeah. And Prabhupada makes a really interesting point, and this is just really interesting. Talking about the Pandavas, their position in separation from him was no less than that of the gopis of Vrindavan. Anyway, that's something you can note down, bear in mind. I mean, that's quite a statement. Yeah, because Prabhupada didn't approve of people making like these an issue of distinctions between the different types of devotees. Pandavas in friendship. Gopis, of course, are in conjugal love. Prabhupada didn't like that people would emphasize that, those who are in conjugal love, just see how they're the better, and like that. That's really interesting. So, but then Prabhupada brings up a very important point, and it's a very transcendental point, that actually separation from him is as good as personal contact. In fact, we will from time to time come across the concept that separation is even more blissful than contact with the Lord. That his remembrance of his form, quality, name, etc. is attractive for the pure devotee, to the point that the pure devotee forgets all about the material forms, qualities, etc. Yeah. And due to the devotee's mature association with other pure devotees, he is not out of contact with the Lord for a moment, even if externally the Lord may be elsewhere. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur makes a point here that he says the intelligent person is described as he who has given up bad association by taking up good association. So without the association of devotees, bad association which causes attachment, hatred, and other bad qualities will not disappear. Without the disappearance of bad qualities, a person will not become strongly attached to the pleasing qualities of the Lord. That's interesting, isn't it? Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. We cannot really become attached to the Lord in this way and that, appreciating his different qualities, unless we become free from the bad material qualities, lust, anger, and greed, etc. And even you can say, to some degree, that to whatever degree you become free of the bad qualities, to that degree you can become attached to the good qualities, pleasing qualities of the Lord. Verse 13, all their hearts were melting for him on the pot of attraction. They looked at him without blinking their eyes, And they moved hither and thither in perplexity. What a scene. When, oh when, will we get some experience of things like that? Well, I remember when Prabhupada left this world. I mean, that's definitely, by far, the closest I've ever been, or so many of us were to these types of emotions. The closest, at least. Doesn't necessarily mean we were very close, but it was the closest when Prabhupada left. The separation was truly amazing. So, okay, Srila Prabhupada makes some points in the purport that why is he so attractive? Because he's the chief eternal amongst all eternals. And not only the chief, but he's actually the maintainer of the many eternals, of all, in other words, of all the eternals. He is the maintainer. That's there in Katha Upanishad. And therefore, one can obtain, Prabhupada says, permanent peace and prosperity by reviving one's eternal relationship with him, which is forgotten at the moment. You know, forgotten means that it was there before, but we forgot. You ever forgotten something? Hare Krishna. Did you ever forget something? Yes? Both of you? Or 2 out of 2? 3 out of 3? So we are prone to forget, I mean, so many things, my Lord. And the fundamental, foundational thing we've forgotten is our relationship with the Lord, which we were in previously. So then Prabhupada makes a very interesting and important point, that once our relationship with the Lord is just slightly revived, not necessarily fully, not necessarily even half, but slightly revived, then we, conditioned souls, become freed from Maya. Yeah. And Prabhupada says, we become mad after the association of the Lord. Yeah. Attracted so much. So, this Krishna's association. So this association with the Lord is made possible not only by personal contact with the Lord, but also by association with his name, fame, form, and quality. Yeah. And to achieve this, we must hear submissively from the pure devotees. Verse 14. The female relatives whose eyes were flooded with tears out of anxiety for Krishna came out of the palace. They could stop their tears only with great difficulty. They feared that tears would cause misfortune at the time of departure. You know, actually I don't know exactly if that is specifically an omen, because there is a science of omens. You understand omens? What an omen is? It's a sign. A sign, oh, something's going to happen. That's an omen. So, yeah. So, like, you know, one omen is if some auspicious person or being passes you on your left side, it's an inauspicious omen. Or in the Bhagavatam, what's mentioned is that for ladies, if they have quivering of the left side, I think, left side of the body, it means something bad's going to happen. And for men, if there's quivering of the right side of the body, it means something inauspicious is going to happen. These are omens. Yeah. So anyway, so maybe it's, they thought that tears at the time of departure might be bad, might cause something bad to happen to Krishna. So maybe it's one of the omens. I'm not familiar much with the whole science. So therefore they tried to stop crying. And this was extremely difficult for them. And therefore they smeared their tears in the eyes. Their hearts throbbed. So Prabhupada makes an interesting point that ladies who were relatives of those who died in the battle didn't contact Krishna directly but heard about him and his pastimes. And in that way, they would then think of him and talk of him and become affectionate towards him also, like those, Prabhupada says, like those who were in direct contact with the Lord. So therefore, Prabhupada concludes the purport, therefore, directly or indirectly, anyone who thinks of Krishna, talks of Krishna or worships Krishna, becomes attached to him. Because Krishna is absolute. There's no difference between his name, form, quality, etc. Our intimate relation with Krishna can be confidentially revived by our talking of, hearing of, or remembering him. It is so done due to the spiritual potency. So we're making good progress through this section here of the Lord leaving for Dwaraka. So verse 15, which doesn't have a purport, while the Lord was departing the palace of Hastinapur, different types of drums, like the mridanga, dola, nagra, dunduri, and dundubi, and flutes like the gomukha, and other instruments like venas and beris, all sounded together to show him honor. And verse 16, out of a loving desire to see the Lord, the royal ladies of the Kurus got up on top of the palace, and smiling with affection and shyness, they showered flowers upon the Lord. I mean, these ladies, they're such amazing persons, such incredible persons with the beauty of shyness, not these loud, outspoken types, but the beauty of shyness. So, yes, so Srila Prabhupada comments, first of all, about shyness. It's a particular extra-natural beauty of the fair sex. Extra-natural means beyond natural. Like, extrasensory perception means perception beyond what your senses can perceive. So extra-natural, just beyond what is the natural beauty, extra special beauty of the fair sex. And it commands respect from the opposite, from the men, definitely. It commands respect. And this was going on even during the Mahabharata times 5,000 years ago. And Prabhupada makes the point that some less intelligent people say that separation of men and women was introduced by the Muslims. Hare Krishna. Anyway, the Muslims had not arrived. They didn't exist at all 5,000 years ago. Yeah. So yeah, the ladies of the palace observed strict parda, restricted association with men. And so they didn't come down in the open air where Krishna and everyone else were assembled. They went onto the roof and paid their respects to Krishna by showering flowers. Really very wonderful. And Prabhupada makes the point that this verse states the ladies were smiling there, checked by shyness. And again, Prabhupada talks about shyness. It's a gift of nature to the fair sex. It enhances their beauty and prestige. Even if they're from a less important family, or even if they're less attractive. And Prabhupada, it's interesting, let's just read this here. We have practical experience of this fact. A sweeper woman commanded the respect of many respectable gentlemen simply by manifesting a lady's shyness. Half-naked ladies in the street do not command any respect. You're not kidding. But a shy sweeper's wife commands respect from all. That's a very important message for ladies from Srila Prabhupada himself. So, Srila Prabhupada then in the second paragraph, he starts examining this whole subject of what is human civilization, what's it for, and what is the problem in material existence. So human life human civilization is to free us from illusion. And women particularly appear beautiful. This is the general idea. Although it's an illusion because their bodies are just made of material elements. But because there's a spirit soul in there, then it appears beautiful. No one's attracted by an earthen doll. Yeah. And the dead body has no beauty. Who will want to accept the dead body of a so-called beautiful woman? Maybe you know the story of liquid beauty. It's a famous story Prabhupada told of one poor girl living with her parents, and she got approached by one very lusty prince who wanted to enjoy life with her. And she's just a very ordinary person, socially speaking. He's really big-time person. So he more or less demanded that I want to enjoy you. And she couldn't really say no, so she didn't. But she said, you know what, I'm busy now. Come back in a few days and you can enjoy my beauty. So then she took purgatives, things that make you vomit and just have terrible diarrhea and all this sort of thing. So after a few days, she looked just haggard. And the young prince came back some days later, knocked on the door, she opened the door, and he didn't even recognize her. And he said, "Where's the beautiful young girl? I want to enjoy her." And she said, "Oh, I'm her, but I understood you want to enjoy my beauty. So I took all my beauty out and I kept it for you." And he didn't know what's going on. So she showed him these buckets full of stool and urine and vomit and told him, "See, there's my beauty. Enjoy it." Prabhupada told that story. You heard that story? You must have. Yeah. So it's the presence of the soul which makes a beautiful body beautiful. Yes. And, in regard to association between men and women, Prabhupada here speaks of famous example, which he spoke of many times, that woman is considered to be like fire and a man is considered to be like butter. And if the butter gets close to the fire, the butter melts and, becomes all wiped out. So, therefore, man and woman can be brought together only when necessary. And shyness is a check for the unrestricted mixing. It's nature's gift and it must be utilized. That's really powerful, Prabhupada. Really giving it straight. So Srila Jiva Goswami makes a comment. The ladies, they glanced at Krishna with shyness and smiles, endowed with prema. Some women had Sringara ras, conjugal rasas, and others had Shanta rasa, the neutral relationship. Those with Sringara rasa could not smile when separation began. Do you get it? The ones in Shanta rasa, they immediately smiled. But the ones in the conjugal rasa couldn't smile when this separation began, because they're feeling too much separation, too much pain of separation. Verse 17, at that time, Arjuna, the great warrior and conqueror of sleep, who is the intimate friend of the most beloved Supreme Lord, took up an umbrella which had a handle of jewels and was embroidered with lace and pearls. So, now there's a purport, we'll have a look in a moment, but it's just interesting to note that Arjuna, he's a big man, he's the brother, sort of, you could say, the most prominent brother of the king. Maybe Bhima, but more likely Arjuna is actually the most prominent brother of Maharaj Yudhisthira. But here he is, engaging in menial service, just holding an umbrella. Yeah. Beautiful umbrella, but still, it's just an umbrella. So Prabhupada explains that in those days, gold, jewels, pearls, valuable stones were used in the luxurious royal ceremonies. Yeah, they were, not common, like really common, but for the royalty and those big people, these things were common. They had plenty. And Prabhupada explains they're actually nature's gifts produced by the hills, oceans, etc., by the Lord's order. when man, and the Lord gives that order when man doesn't waste his valuable time in producing unwanted things in the name of necessities. So just see. Yeah. Prabhupada says, by so-called development of industrial enterprises, they're using pots of gutta percha instead of metals like gold, silver, brass, and copper. They're using margarine instead of purified butter, ghee. And 1/4 of the city population has no shelter. Whew. Wow, that's amazing. And Srila Prabhupada, or not Srila Prabhupada actually, but I looked it up somewhere. I can't remember. So Gutta Percha is a tree of a certain family of trees. The name Gutta Percha, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it properly or if it's Gutta Percha. Have you heard the term? The name also refers to the rigid, naturally biologically inert, resilient, electrically non-conductive thermoplastic latex derived from the tree. Haribol. Yeah. And I looked it up. It is a polymer. Oh, you must know what a polymer is. You're MTech. A polymer of isoprene, which forms a rubber-like elastoma. Okay. So much for that. But it's interesting. Prabhupada, of course, was from a pharmaceutical background, so he knew all about chemicals. Right. Yeah, and they're using margarine and not ghee. Now I remember in at least one Rath Yatra of ours, many years ago, we had a team making halava, like really lots and lots of halava. And they were using margarine and not butter. And I saw that, I tell you, I got fried. And I told them. So verse 18, Uddhava and Satyaki began to fan the Lord with decorated fans. And the Lord, as the master of Madhu, seated on scattered flowers, commanded them along the road. See, Uddhava and Satyaki, these are also two really important people. Uddhava was the advisor, the minister, and personal assistant of Lord Krishna. And Satyaki was the general of his army, the actual leader of his army. But even though they're so extremely important, they took up this menial service of just fanning the Lord. Yes, okay, and then verse 19, which is the last verse in this section. Here and there were heard the benedictions being paid to Krishna, which were neither befitting nor unbefitting, because they were all for the Absolute, who was now playing the part of a human being. Excuse me, just like you can say, the Lord bowing down to Maharaj Yudhisthira. It's neither, you can say it's befitting, you can say it's unbefitting. Depends on the perspective. In terms of rasa, it's well, it depends. Socially, it's befitting. But in terms of actual position, it's completely unbefitting. But you can take it either way. Right, so as the Lord was going, now he's actually in the process of leaving. I mean, he's moving on his chariot. He's exiting from Hastinapur. So there were different sounds. We read about how there were different musical instruments playing, but there are also benedictions, like blessings for the Lord, which were fitting in the sense that he's playing the part of a human, like a cousin of Maharaj Yudhisthira, but unfitting because he's the Lord. So you can take it as you like, really. So Prabhupada explains that the Lord is nirguna, means he has no material qualities. He's described in the verses nirgunasya, without any material, no gunas, like rajagun, tamagun, etc. No gunas, no material qualities, but he's full of transcendental qualities. In the spiritual world, nothing is contradictory, but in the material world, everything has an opposite, has its opposite. Here, white is the opposite of black, but in the spiritual world, there's no distinction between white and black. That's pretty advanced, isn't it? So therefore, the benedictions being given by these learned Brahmins here and there, they seem contradictory in relation to the Lord. But then when they're applied properly, they lose all contradiction and become transcendental. So, and then Prabhupada gives a very famous example. Krishna is sometimes described as a thief. He's very famous amongst his pure devotees as Makanchor, the butter thief. Yes. And he would steal from the houses. So, but in spite of being famous as a thief, he's worshipped as a thief, even by the people who he stole from. Yeah, generally speaking, those who are thieves, they're not popular people, only amongst crazy people. But otherwise, thieves, people avoid the association of them unless they're crazy. But Krishna, so famous as a thief and worshipped as a thief, it's absolute. It's absolute. So Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, since he's the absolute personality of Godhead, everything is applicable to him, and still in spite of all contradictions, he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, so that's the last verse in this section, isn't it? But Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur makes a point. I mean, he makes many points, but we've taken one out. From the point of view of the Lord's powers, blessings such as be happy are inappropriate for one who is without material qualities and full of spiritual bliss. because the Lord is just by nature full of spiritual bliss, and it can't be removed from him. Yeah. From the point of view of sweetness, the same blessings are appropriate for the Lord, who has spiritual qualities, such as being controlled by the devotees' prema and being devoted to Brahmins. The words are appropriate because when the Lord replies, I am always happy with your blessings, his words should not be false. You get that? That's a slightly tricky English construction. The words are appropriate because the Lord applies, I'm always happy with your blessings, and whatever he says should never be false. So it should be true. Yeah. So therefore it was good they said it, because it's true. So, okay, devotees, here we are at the beginning of section E, is it? Let me just check which section it is. It might be a mistake. Section D. Oh no, section C. Sorry, it's it's funny. Word has a mind of its own sometimes, I tell you what. It's amazing. I put it in, I just copied it and pasted it in with a C. I didn't write it again. I copied it and pasted it. But Word has to, don't ask me why, change the letter. Anyway, don't worry, devotees, we'll survive. So section C, the ladies of Hastinapur glorify Krishna, verses 20 to 30. So of course we need to read the actual verses themselves, verse 20 to verse 30. So we'll do that, and then when we've finished that, we'll finish for tonight. Verse 20. Absorbed in the thought of the transcendental qualities of the Lord, who's glorified in select poetry, the ladies on the roofs of all the houses of Hastinapur began to talk of him. This talk was more attractive than the hymns of the Vedas. Text 21. They said, the ladies on the roofs of the houses, right? The ones who are very shy, and therefore they didn't come down. So those ladies said, here he is, the original personality of Godhead, as we definitely remember him. He alone existed before the manifested creation of the modes of nature, and in him only, because he's the Supreme Lord, all living beings merge as if sleeping at night, their energy suspended. So, they're real philosophers too. They really have deep understanding. So, okay, where are we now? Gosh. Verse 22. The personality of Godhead, again desiring to give names and forms to his parts and parcels. This is the ladies continuing. The personality of Godhead, again desiring to give names and forms to his parts and parcels, the living entities, placed them under the guidance of material nature. By his own potency, material nature is empowered to create. They know their stuff. Verse 24. Here is the same Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose transcendental form is experienced by the great devotees, her completely cleansed of material consciousness by dint of rigid devotional service and full control of life and the senses. And that is the only way to purify existence. Boy, these ladies, they know what they're talking about. Well, that was verse 23, sorry. Verse 24, is it? Have I got it right? Yeah, I made a mistake. The verse we just read was 23. Here comes verse 24. Oh, dear friends, here is that very personality of Godhead, whose attractive and confidential pastimes are described in the confidential parts of Vedic literature by his great devotees. It is he only who creates, maintains, and annihilates the material world, and yet remains unaffected. Verse 25. Boy, this is amazing. This is the ladies. Sure. Whenever there are kings and administrators living like animals in the lowest modes of existence, the Lord in his transcendental form manifests his supreme power, the truth positive, shows special mercy to the faithful, performs wonderful activities, and manifests various transcendental forms, as is necessary in different periods and ages. Verse 26. Oh, how supremely glorified is the dynasty of King Yadu, and how virtuous is the land of Mathura, where the supreme leader of all living beings, the husband of the goddess of fortune, has taken his birth and wandered in his childhood. Verse 27. Undoubtedly it is wonderful that Dwaraka has defeated the glories of the heavenly planets and has enhanced the celebrity of the earth. The inhabitants of Dwaraka are always serving the soul of all living beings, Krishna, in his loving feature. He glances at them and favors them with sweet smiles. Verse 28. O friends, just think of his wives, whose hands he has accepted, how they must have undergone vows, baths, fire sacrifices, and perfect worship of the Lord of the universe, to constantly relish now the nectar from his lips by kissing. The damsels of Vrajabhumi would often faint just by expecting such favors. 29. The children of these ladies are Pradyumna, Samba, Amba, etc. Ladies like Rukmini, Satyabhama, and Jambavati were forcibly taken away by him from their Swayamvara ceremonies after he defeated many powerful kings headed by Shishupal. And other ladies were also forcibly taken away by him after he killed Bhaumasura and thousands of his assistants. All these ladies are glorious. And verse 30, which is the last verse of this section, all these women auspiciously glorified their lives despite their being without individuality and without purity. That sounds interesting. Their husband, the lotus-eyed personality of Godhead, never left them alone at home. He always pleased their hearts by making valuable presentations. So there you go, devotees. That's verse 20 to verse 30, third section, and we will read it, the full thing, tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.